A while ago, I made a video on 7th generation hidden gems that I thought were all deserving of a spotlight. Games that weren't quite AAA, but had a charming feel to them that made them feel a bit more unique than the big budget titles of the time. One of the sort of themes from that video is that there aren't a whole lot of games like that in this day and age. There aren't games that are just video games anymore. Everything nowadays is either a live service game or trying to be on the same level as Hollywood movies with massive prioritizations of, to be honest, lackluster stories over meaningful or fun gameplay. But honestly, I hate to admit it, but I'm kind of nostalgic for the emergence of this movement. Now I hate it, and a lot of AAA games feel exactly the same, but the early steps of this new wave of games is something I'm starting to look back on fondly. I'm mainly talking about games from the early days of the 8th generation, that being the Xbox One and the PS4. At the time, I do remember people being like, oh, Windows 8 and the Xbox One suck, but I also remember the hype for Advanced Warfare and people buying Xbox Ones just to play it. And now I look back at that small window of time with nostalgia. A lot of games during that era had a very quote-unquote modern or futuristic feel that was very different from the Frutiger era or Frutiger Metro aesthetics of years prior. Now, it didn't feel like the future we were promised with those aesthetics, but it felt like we were definitely entering a new era of society where minimalism was king and efficiency was the only course of action. Games from around this time reflected that, so in this video, I'm covering some of my favorite examples. Today, we're looking at early 8th generation video games. So before we start, remember to subscribe. I talk about video games and internet phenomena in a few different series on this channel, so if that interests you, be sure to subscribe to never miss an upload. I also live stream from time to time right here on this YouTube channel, so if you want to come hang out, crack some jokes, or discuss stuff, come join us sometime. And if you can't make it to those streams live, feel free to subscribe to my second channel, RatedEm Live. I upload all the best moments from my live streams onto there. But with all of that out of the way, let's jump into some of my favorite early 8th gen games. So the first game I want to discuss, and actually the game that inspired me to make this video, is Zoo Tycoon for the Xbox One. When I got my Xbox One, it came with Dance Central Spotlight, Kinect Sports Rivals, and Zoo Tycoon. And it also came with Doom 2016, but I was like 12 years old or so, and owning a game about Satan and demons scared like the shit out of me, so I just went and traded it in at AB Games. Zoo Tycoon was the one I played the most because I had no real interest in Dance Central Spotlight, and Kinect Sports Rivals just didn't live up to the original Kinect Sports, so I rarely played it. Zoo Tycoon was a heater though. The reason I'm bringing up Zoo Tycoon is because I played it recently and remember there is a lot of functionality with the Xbox One Kinect. You can skip button prompts and menus just by ordering commands at your Kinect, which is really weird to think about now, but at the time this was really forward. It pushed the idea of the player and the game being in the same realm. No longer were you and Zoo Tycoon separated by a screen. You could interact with the game in a way that a controller could never. Or at least that was the intention. And I know that Skyrim and Alien Isolation had Kinect microphone functionality on the Xbox 360 right at the tail end of its life cycle, but it was more to add to gameplay rather than being a quality of life thing, which Zoo Tycoon was absolutely trying to achieve. It was along the lines of, now you can control video games with just your voice. Soon enough, you won't need a controller. Like, it was a very progressive, futuristic addition rather than, hey, wouldn't it be funny if you could just Fus Roda in real life and to do it in game. Another game that inspired this video was Infamous Second Son, which dropped for the PS4 a year after the console's release. It is arguably one of the best examples of the vibe and aesthetic I'm trying to compile through these games. First off, the game doesn't even boot you into a start screen. You load into the game, you see the production companies, and it throws you into a loading menu that puts you right into the game. It definitely pushes that minimalist aesthetic that was booming during this time, and again, it sort of feels like this is the new era of technology. We're done with start screens, and soon enough, loading screens too. The thing that puts Second Son on the map for me is the emphasis on controller functionality. Now, the PlayStation 4 controller has this big touchpad that I've seen get used in a few more recent titles, like I know in Ghost of Tsushima, when you swipe upwards on the touchpad, it blows the wind in-game in a direction that leads you to your next objective. But Infamous Second Son also used the touchpad in some pretty creative ways. In Second Son, the main character, Delson Rowe, has superpowers that revolve around smoke, so to recharge your powers, you'll have to find smokestacks and use the touchpad to siphon the smoke out of it. Another example was using the controller as a spray can. So Delson Rowe loves making street art, and in the game, you'll be tasked with holding the controller vertically and using the controller's gyroscope technology to fill in stencils for street art. You'll have to shake the controller, use the bumpers as these spray cans trigger, and physically move the controller to cover the stencil in paint. I wish that more games did stuff like this, and I know that this example sort of only works with the PS4 controller, but if some creative mind out there had an idea for a feature in a game, like the spray can minigame, I would eat it up. The closest thing I can think of now is that some indie games involve you looking outside of the game for certain things that happen inside the game. Like, I haven't played it, but I've heard that One Shot has a few puzzles that I think involve you looking through the files or like changing the window size of the game, and that's why the console versions are so different from the original, because features like that can pretty much only be done on PC. So for that reason, I can see why more games didn't do stuff like this. Like, it's very console exclusive. But like, the PlayStation 5 had adaptive triggers so that you can feel more immersed when you pull the string of a bow or fire a heavy gun. Why aren't more features like that included in consoles nowadays? Xbox was marketing the Series X as this super powerful console, and don't get me wrong, it loads very fast and games look amazing on it, but as someone who doesn't really give a fuck about how many terashits per megafart a console can output, how am I supposed to get excited for the new console? If it included something like the Kinect that was new and innovative, like a new controller feature, I probably wouldn't have waited 2 years to get one. Just a quick tangent on the overall aesthetic of games at this time. Not only were games from this era actually very graphically impressive, with some of them even holding up today, but as I mentioned previously, there's this big push for minimalism across the board. You saw it in console menus and in the games. The biggest example that comes to mind is Battlefield 1, which is one of my favorite games of all time. I could honestly make a whole video about this game alone, but Battlefield 1's menus are very sleek and very minimalist, and honestly, it's not in an annoying way. I find that a lot of quote-unquote minimalist stuff, both from today's age and back then, is very annoying, but Battlefield 1 never really felt pretentious about its minimalist menus. It honestly makes the game feel less like, fuck yeah, war is awesome and epic and cool, and it gives the game a very solemn and respectful tone regarding its source material, for a lack of a better term. The minimalist design of the menus for Battlefield 1 really put the focus on World War I as a topic, and it fails to glorify the conflict, which is a really good thing. It sort of reminds you, hey, World War I was a real tragedy, and lots of people gave their lives up for it. People who were both directly and indirectly involved in the conflict died, and it's not something that's meant to be put on a pedestal. Okay, tangent over. I want to finish this video up by talking about the emergence of live service games during this time. There's only two that really stick out for me. I'm sure there's a bunch of others that I can bring up, but my two examples really hit the nail on the head. The first one I want to talk about is Project Spark, which is another game that could honestly get its own video. Project Spark, for those who are unaware, was basically Roblox designed specifically for the Xbox One. People could make their own games in the game, and then you could play other people's games in the game. There was no separate programs, and it was all doable on the console. Project Spark was on PC, but a PC was not required to make or play the games on Project Spark. As I'm writing this, I guess you could say it's a little more akin to Little Big Planet, but LBP you could play offline and still be able to do stuff. Like, you could make your own levels and play the main story without an internet connection. Project Spark falls more in line with the aesthetic I'm talking about because it was entirely online and completely built up of player-made creations. Hence why I said it was a bit more like Roblox. The next game I want to discuss regarding the emergence of live service games is actually Assassin's Creed Unity. This game tried to make the whole Animus thing feel more real. Like, instead of seeing a protagonist use the Animus in the video game Assassin's Creed, you, the player, were using the Animus through Assassin's Creed Unity. The game had co-op multiplayer and numerous missions surrounding the co-op multiplayer, but arguably the biggest element to my argument here is the progression. In Unity, you can just outright buy items that you haven't unlocked. You would buy Helix credits, which are kind of like COD points or virtual currency from 2K, and you would just straight up buy weapons and armor that you didn't feel like unlocking or that you didn't own. It was one of the first times I'd seen microtransactions in video games, but shout out to Advanced Warfare for also being one of my first encounters with microtransactions. A few honorable mentions before I close out the video are the entire console of the Wii U. I vividly remember seeing a commercial where a guy puts like a sports game on the TV screen, and the game that the person was playing on the TV just goes down onto the touchscreen so they can keep playing it. If I find the commercial, I'll edit it in. Another honorable mention is Sunset Overdrive, which, and say it with me this time, could get its own video. I don't want to say this game fits into the niche I'm talking about, but it definitely is a period piece from like when Deadpool was the funniest thing of all time. It wasn't a part of this minimalist emergence, but it also was definitely not a relic of the swag era, and it was way before the hypebeast era from my knowledge. Regardless, I replayed it recently, and it is absolutely a time capsule from when we all thought references were the coolest thing ever and fourth wall breaks were hilarious. I want to end the video by asking if anyone else knows what I'm talking about. If there's any games or pieces of tech from the years of Windows 8 and Google Glass that I didn't mention, leave it down in the comments. I'm genuinely interested to see if not only other people know what I mean, but if there are any examples that other people have. Aside from that, I'll see you all later. Subscribe and all that stuff. I'm working on revamping the channel aesthetic, so I don't have an outro yet, but pretend this is a really cool outro that's like fucking blowing your mind and it makes you want to subscribe and like the video and hit the bell and watch some other videos I posted. Please, I'm begging you.